In early March 1943, in sweltering Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea, Captain Paul Irvin Gunn, his hands grimy with grease, inadvertently dropped a wrench. His gaze was fixed on a bomber that had undergone radical changes. Hidden within this machine was something that defied all established norms, something that violated every conceivable rule of the U.S. Army Air Forces, something that his immediate commander had not officially approved. Where the bombardier's transparent nose was designed to be 8 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns now protruded menacingly. The B-25 Mitchell medium bomber, originally built for high-altitude precision bombing, had been transformed into something entirely different, a formidable ship killer, a destroyer of enemy commerce. This daring, unauthorized experiment was fraught with risk. It could either save the Pacific theater from imminent collapse or lead Gunn himself straight to a court-martial. Neither Gunn nor anyone else at that moment could have possibly imagined that this unauthorized modification, born of desperation and personal fury, would lead to the most crushing defeat ever suffered by the Japanese fleet throughout the bloody Pacific campaign. The triumph of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific was determined not so much by strategic plans developed in Washington, but by innovative solutions born in the workshops and hangars under the guidance of a 43-year-old engineering innovator. His name was Paul Irvin Gunn, and he was fighting his own equally important war. The story of this remarkable man began on December 8, 1941, in Manila, when Japanese aircraft launched a devastating attack on U.S. Air Forces in the Philippines. Gunn, then manager of the fledgling Philippine Airlines, had only 4 civilian Red Beach 18 aircraft at his disposal. Within hours, Major General Louis Brereton mobilized these planes and commissioned Gunn as a captain in the USAF. This episode, intended as a brief involvement in the war, evolved into a 3-year odyssey full of innovative ideas, a quest for vengeance and technological breakthroughs. At the outbreak of the war, Gunn was 42 years old. He had 20 years of naval service behind him, rising from enlisted man to chief petty officer before retiring in 1939. He had mastered the art of piloting in the 1920s, served in the famous Top Hatters fighter squadron, and taught at Pensacola Naval Air Station. Gunn knew airplanes not from textbooks, but from years of practical experience, flying, and, at times, crashes. His knowledge was deep and comprehensive. On that tragic December morning, as the threat of war loomed, years of accumulated technical expertise and professional skills suddenly lost their significance. A much more acute and personal problem arose for Lieutenant Colonel Gunn, his beloved wife, Clara Louise. Known to all as Polly, and their 4 precious children were caught in the very epicenter of the impending storm in Manila, as Japanese forces relentlessly approached the city. Gunn's 2 sons, Paul Jr. and Nathan, were already in their teens, while his daughters, Connie and Julie, were still very young. The family had enjoyed a comfortable expatriate life in Manila, where Gunn managed the airline, but this idyll vanished in an instant. In the chaotic weeks that followed, filled with anxiety and uncertainty, Lieutenant Colonel Gunn, oblivious to danger, carried out reconnaissance and transport missions, breaking through the collapsing Filipino defenses. He skillfully evaded enemy Japanese fighters, demonstrating miracles of piloting and tactical mastery. On one occasion, he even had to survive a crash when his plane was shot down over impassable jungles. Overcoming all difficulties, he managed to escape to safety and, without losing a moment, took to the skies again in another aircraft, ready for new assignments. During one of his most perilous operations, Gunn was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. He bravely flew an unarmed transport plane to the besieged island of Bataan, delivering much-needed medical supplies to American troops desperately in need of help. Navigating through Japanese-controlled airspace, he relied solely on his unparalleled skill and audacious courage, demonstrating an example of true heroism. Tragic events unfolded in Gunn's life when he found himself separated from his family. On Christmas Eve 1941, having received strict orders to evacuate key personnel to Australia, he made desperate attempts to save his loved ones. Gathering all his savings and borrowing money from fellow servicemen, Gunn prepared to evacuate his family to safety. However, the rapid advance of Japanese forces shattered his plans. His family could not reach the airfield in time, and Gunn was faced with an unbearable choice: abandon them or disobey orders. Obeying duty, realizing the importance of the war, and understanding that staying meant certain death or capture, he flew to Australia. Weeks later, on January 20th, 1942, Polly and the children were captured by Japanese forces and interned at the University of Santo Tomas, a camp for enemy civilians. This terrible news deeply shook Gunn. The man who continued to fight was no longer the one who had left Manila. He had left his wife and her 4 children in the hands of a ruthless enemy. Each day they spent in the camp was agonizing for him, as he could not protect them. The only thing left for Gunn was to strive for a swift end to the war. If he could not save his family directly, then he must destroy every ship, every plane, every supply line supporting Japanese forces in the Philippines. This became his personal vendetta, disguised as an innovative strategy. In late July 1942, Major General George C. Kenny arrived in Brisbane to lead the Allied air forces in the Southwest Pacific and was confronted with a dismal situation. His predecessor had been relieved of duty, morale was extremely low, and technical equipment was subpar. Japanese forces dominated the airspace over New Guinea, posing a direct threat to Australia. General Douglas MacArthur, the theatre commander, openly distrusted his air forces. Kenny, a 53-year-old World War I fighter ace with 2 confirmed victories and a Silver Star, had previously taught at the Air Corps Tactical School, where he was known for his unconventional approach to problem-solving. After prolonged criticism from General MacArthur regarding the shortcomings of Allied air power, Kenny, showing composure, made a single request to the commander to be given the authority to send home anyone he deemed ineffective. MacArthur, surprised by such a request, gave his consent. Within weeks, Kenny carried out a radical reorganization of the command structure, brought in energetic and proactive young officers, and established a forward headquarters in New Guinea. To expedite decision-making, he appointed Brigadier General Ennis Whitehead as his forward commander, empowering him to quickly reallocate aircraft based on changing weather and tactical conditions, bypassing the need to wait for orders from Brisbane. However, personnel changes alone could not yield the desired results without effective weaponry. Allied medium and high-altitude bombing operations proved utterly ineffective against the Japanese fleet. High altitude gave Japanese ships valuable time to perform evasive maneuvers. Heavy B-17 bombers demonstrated extremely low accuracy hitting less than 1% of their targets. Japanese convoys, seemingly invisible, continued to supply their garrisons in New Guinea. While Allied forces suffered heavy losses in the impassable jungles, fresh Japanese reinforcements landed unhindered from ships that remained invulnerable to bombing attacks. This problem had occupied Kenny since 1928, when he taught at the tactical school. He harbored the idea of skip bombing, which involved dropping bombs from extremely low altitudes, so that they would, like flat stones skipped across water, glide along the surface, striking the sides of ships below the waterline, in their most vulnerable spot, where armor protection was minimal. Theoretically, the concept looked very promising, but its practical implementation proved to be fraught with serious difficulties. B-17 bombers were not equipped with sufficient offensive armament. A mast-height attack meant an inevitable flight through dense anti-aircraft fire without the ability to suppress enemy gun emplacements. However, the situation changed dramatically when Kenny became aware of Paul Gunn's activities. In August 1942, Kenny received intelligence that someone in the 3rd Attack Group was unauthorizedly modifying A-20 Havoc light bombers. The modifications, though somewhat crude, were highly effective. The unknown craftsman had removed the transparent bombardier's nose and, in its place, installed 4 forward-firing 50 caliber machine guns. The idea was to suppress enemy fire with a massive barrage from low altitude directly before dropping bombs. During the ensuing investigation, Kenny identified Captain Paul Gunn, who was almost single-handedly salvaging armament from damaged fighters and installing it on attack aircraft. Gunn, lacking formal engineering education, had independently, through trial and error, mastered the art of aircraft modification. However, thanks to 20 years of practical experience, he had an excellent understanding of aircraft design, weight distribution, and weapon systems. While most officers would have immediately court-martialed Gunn for unauthorized modification of military equipment, Kenny acted differently. He immediately brought him into his personal staff, appointing him Special Projects Officer, and tasked him with a seemingly impossible mission to re-equip all available A-20s in the theater for low-altitude attacks as quickly as possible. In wartime, when every piece of equipment counted and initiative could turn the tide of battle, talented engineers became true heroes. One such resourceful individual was Gunn, who worked tirelessly, sometimes 18 hours a day. He displayed wonders of ingenuity, salvaging weapons from crashed aircraft, creating mounting brackets in field workshops, and personally testing each modification. His efforts were aimed at transforming ordinary planes into formidable machines for assault attacks. Gunn modernized the A-20s by installing 4 heavy 50 caliber machine guns in the nose of each bomber. In addition, he placed extra gun positions along the fuselage and equipped the aircraft with bomb racks for parachute fragmentation bombs. These enhancements transformed the A-20s into deadly attack aircraft capable of inflicting crushing blows on ground targets. In September 1942, the modified A-20s were thrown into battle, attacking the Japanese airfield at Buna. The results exceeded the wildest expectations. Flying at treetop level, the attack aircraft unleashed a barrage of fire, suppressing enemy anti-aircraft positions before dropping their bombs. Japanese soldiers, accustomed to high-altitude bombings for which they could prepare in advance, were completely unprepared for such a sudden assault. The attack resulted in the destruction of dozens of aircraft directly on the ground and demonstrated the enormous potential of low-altitude assault operations in modern warfare. Seeing the impressive results of Gunn's work, Kenny ordered immediate similar modifications to the B-25 Mitchell medium bombers. The B-25 surpassed the A-20 in many aspects. It was larger, had a longer range, carried more bombs, and could be equipped with more powerful offensive armament. If Gunn could transform the Mitchell into an attack aircraft, it would become the most effective anti-ship weapon in the entire theater of operations. The development of the B-25 Mitchell, a medium horizontal bomber, began in 1939, a response to the need for a versatile aerial platform. This twin-engine aircraft with a wingspan of 67.6 feet, 20.6 meters, was powered by two Wright R2600 radial engines, each delivering 1,700 horsepower, providing the necessary thrust for a variety of combat missions. Standard armament included 6.50 caliber machine guns for defense against enemy fighters and a bomb load of up to 3,000 pounds, weight 360 kilo, allowing for significant damage to be inflicted on the enemy. The B-25 crew consisted of 5 members: pilot, co-pilot, bombardier, radio operator and gunner, ensuring effective mission execution in the air. The aircraft was named in honor of General Billy Mitchell, a staunch advocate for the development of military aviation, whose views, however, led to conflict with higher command and a court-martial in 1925. Approximately 9,890 B-25s were built in total at North American aviation factories in Inglewood, California, and Kansas City, Kansas. The B-25 made history in April 1942 when Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle led a group of 16 B-25B aircraft in a daring raid on Tokyo, launching from the aircraft carrier USS Hornet. Although the Doolittle raid did not inflict significant material damage, it had immense moral significance, boosting American spirits after the tragedy of Pearl Harbor. Importantly, this operation forced Japan to redeploy some fighter aircraft to defend its territory, thereby weakening its forward positions. Nevertheless, the B-25's primary mission remained medium-altitude bombing, which, as it turned out, was not always effective against naval targets. Gunn's gaze fell upon the B-25, and he saw in it a hidden potential that remained unnoticed by others. His attention was drawn to the aircraft's spacious nose section, ideally suited for mounting a powerful machine gun arsenal. The twin-engine design instilled confidence in its reliability, as even with one engine failure, the aircraft retained the ability to continue flying. Its sturdy construction provided confidence in its ability to withstand significant damage. But most importantly, the Mitchell had sufficient range to reach Japanese sea lanes, which were inaccessible to the A-20 with its limited radius of action. In late 1942, Gunn began to realize his vision, starting the B-25 modification in a maintenance hangar in Townsville, Australia. His loyal assistant was Captain Jack Fox, North American Aviation's technical representative in the theater. Fox's duties included ensuring that aircraft modifications adhered to factory standards. However, he became Gunn's accomplice, together bringing to life the most successful unauthorized aircraft modification program of the entire war. The first step was to eliminate the bombardier and his glass nose. This reduced weight and removed a vulnerable position useless for low-level attacks. The transparent nose gave way to an all-metal structure that housed 4 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, aimed forward and controlled by the pilot. Each machine gun had a capacity of 500 rounds. The rate of fire for each gun reached approximately 850 rounds per minute, allowing the pilot to unleash a torrent of lead on the enemy, capable of tearing apart any target in a matter of seconds. However, the 4 50 caliber Browning machine guns originally equipped with the B-25 did not satisfy designer Gunn. He went further, installing another pair of identical machine guns in side blisters, one on each side of the nose fuselage, just below and behind the cockpit. These machine guns were mounted to protrude slightly beyond the propeller's rotation plane, allowing them to fire without fear of damaging the propellers. Being rigidly fixed and directed forward, they significantly increased the aircraft's firepower available to the pilot. Then Gunn made a bold and unconventional decision. The B-25 bomber had an upper turret with 2.50 caliber machine guns located behind the crew cockpit. This turret, designed for defense against attacks from the upper and rear hemispheres, could rotate. Gunn fixed it in a strictly forward-firing position, thus adding 2 more machine guns, control of which was transferred to the pilot. Now, the co-pilot could operate these machine guns using a special sight installed in the cockpit, or the pilot could fire all the armament simultaneously by pressing the main trigger. As a result of the modifications, the B-25 acquired an impressive arsenal of 8 forward-firing .50 caliber machine guns, capable of unleashing approximately 178 pounds, 81 kilos, of lead per second on the enemy. For comparison, the P-51 Mustang, considered one of the best fighters of its time, carried only 6 machine guns of the same caliber. Thus, the modernized B-25 possessed firepower exceeding that of a fighter, and all this was concentrated on a platform capable of carrying up to 2,000 pounds, 907 kg of bombs. Transforming a bomber into an attack aircraft entailed a number of serious design challenges. The installation of additional armament led to an increase in weight in the nose section, which significantly altered the aircraft's center of gravity, making it unstable and difficult to control. Engineer Gunn managed to balance the structure by relocating some equipment to the tail section and adding ballast to the tail assembly. The powerful recoil from simultaneously firing 8 machine guns created significant stress on the aircraft's structure, threatening its integrity. To solve this problem, Gunn reinforced the nose section with additional bracing, increasing its strength and resistance to vibrations. Furthermore, intense firing led to the generation of a large amount of heat and smoke, which could pose a danger to the crew and equipment. Gunn developed an effective ventilation system and relocated the ammunition storage to a safer place to minimize the risk of fire. A key task was the harmonization of the machine guns. It was necessary to ensure that the bullet trajectories from all 8 barrels converged at a single point at a specific distance in front of the aircraft, typically between 600 and 1,200 feet, 180 to 365 meters. Incorrect adjustment could lead to scattered fire and low shooting effectiveness. Gunn developed a special ground testing procedure using targets placed at precisely measured distances. He personally adjusted each machine gun mount until perfect convergence of all 8 barrels was achieved. The engineer personally conducted tests, making minute adjustments and refusing to sign off on an aircraft's readiness until it met his high standards for accuracy and reliability. Converting the B-25 bombers into deadly low-altitude attack aircraft was a complex undertaking, requiring approximately 2 weeks of continuous work on each machine. Possessing engineering ingenuity and organizational talent, Gann managed to streamline the process, training technicians to work as a unified mechanism, much like an assembly line in a factory. By the end of 1942, his efforts had completely re-equipped the 91st Bomb Squadron. However, successfully implementing the new tactics required a commander who combined an understanding of low-altitude attack specifics with a willingness to deviate from traditional combat methods. Kenny's choice fell on Major Ed Lana, whose career had soared rapidly due to his bravery and leadership qualities demonstrated in battle. In just a few weeks, he made a dizzying leap from first lieutenant to major, earning a reputation as a fearless and skilled pilot whom Kenny could trust with the squadron's fate. Working closely together, Lana and Gann developed tactics that would later revolutionize naval warfare. The modified B-25s, like birds of prey, swooped towards Japanese ships at treetop level, barely skimming the water's surface, sometimes as low as 50 feet above the waves. Reaching maximum speeds of up to 300 miles per hour, they put enemy gunners in a virtually hopeless position. At such breathtaking speed and extremely low altitude, shipboard anti-aircraft gunners were unable to effectively track the aircraft's maneuvers. Aiming time was reduced to negligible fractions of a second, and before the gunners could target their weapons, the bombers had already vanished, leaving behind only whistling wind and the deafening roar of engines. As a B-25 bomber approached its target, pilots, displaying remarkable composure, unleashed a barrage of fire from 8 nose-mounted machine guns from a distance of about 900 meters to 1,000 yards. A deadly hail of heavy-caliber bullets rained down on the enemy vessel's deck, instantly striking or neutralizing anti-aircraft gunners, destroying firing positions, inflicting severe damage on superstructures, and throwing the crew into a panic. The primary objective was not to sink the ship with gunfire alone, although the collateral damage could be significant. The paramount goal was to suppress the ship's defenses and instill a sense of fear and helplessness among the crew. Then came the bombing phase. From a distance of 180 to 365 meters, 200 to 400 yards, while piloting the aircraft at an extremely low altitude, the pilot released a bomb equipped with a delayed action fuse set for 4 to 5 seconds. The bomb, having left the bomb bay, hurtled forward at 300 miles per hour, struck the water's surface, and continued to skip across it. After 1 or 2 ricochets, it slammed into the ship's side at or just below the waterline. Thanks to the delayed fuse, the explosion did not occur on impact. The bomb penetrated the hull, traveled inside the ship's structure, burrowed slightly deeper, and only then detonated, inflicting maximum damage on the enemy. The tragedy unfolded in the ship's most vulnerable area, where the armor was least reliable. An underwater explosion possessed colossal force due to the incompressibility of water, which transmitted shock waves with maximum efficiency. A single bomb detonating below the waterline could inflict irreparable damage, breaking the keel, damaging fuel tanks, causing flooding of engine rooms, and provoking a general structural collapse of the vessel. The B-25, having completed its deadly mission, was already gaining altitude, seeking to escape the effects of the explosion and potential secondary detonations. The entire attack process from the first shots to the moment the bombs were dropped took only about 10 seconds. It is worth noting that the technique of skip bombing was not entirely new. British forces had already conducted experiments in this area, and some American pilots had also tried to apply it independently. However, it was Gann who managed to combine skip bombing with powerful frontal fire, which became a true breakthrough. Thanks to the assault nose, the bomber transformed into a self-sufficient escort fighter, effectively suppressing enemy defenses immediately before bomb release. This combination proved incredibly destructive and effective. While Gann diligently worked on improving aviation technology, Allied intelligence services tirelessly monitored the movements of the Japanese fleet. Operation Ultra, a complex system for intercepting and deciphering Japanese naval codes, provided the Allies with valuable information about enemy plans. The fleet radio unit Melbourne Nearshore Frumel read Japanese messages almost in real time, giving the Allies a significant advantage. In late February 1943, Frumel analysts intercepted a series of messages indicating the formation of a large Japanese convoy in Rabaul, located on the island of New Britain. The convoy's final destination was Lae, on the northern coast of New Guinea. The convoy was intended to deliver reinforcements and essential supplies to Japanese troops fighting fierce battles against the Allied advance in Papua. The intelligence data was very specific. 8 transport ships were to carry approximately 6,900 soldiers of the 51st Division, and 8 destroyers were to provide reliable escort and protection. According to the intercepted messages, the convoy was to depart Rabaul at midnight on February 28, 1943, and arrive in Lae approximately 3 days later. This operation represented the culmination of Japan's efforts to strengthen its positions in New Guinea. If the convoy succeeded, Japanese forces would receive significant reinforcements, which could potentially halt the Allied advance. However, the convoy's failure would mean the loss of thousands of experienced Japanese soldiers and might forever deter larger-scale naval operations for resupply. General Kenny saw a unique opportunity to test modernized aircraft and innovative tactical approaches in battle against a target whose significance surpassed all operations since the tragedy of Pearl Harbor. Without losing time, he mobilized all combat-ready aircraft under his command for a meticulously planned and coordinated attack. The vanguard of the strike group was to consist of the legendary B-17 Flying Fortresses, striking from echeloned altitudes, followed by the Royal Australian Air Force's Beaufighter attack aircraft, skimming just above the ground P-38 Lightning fighters, providing an impenetrable air umbrella, and finally the modified B-25 bombers employing skip bombing tactics. This operation promised to be the largest and most coordinated air campaign in the Southwest Pacific at that time. On February 28th, General Kenny personally briefed squadron commanders, clearly and unequivocally outlining the tasks: locate the enemy convoy, attack it with relentless fury, giving no chance of escape, and sink every single ship. This was not just a raid, but an operation for the complete annihilation of enemy forces. At midnight on February 28, 1943, the Japanese convoy departed Simpson Harbor in Rabaul. Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura flew his flag aboard the destroyer Shirayuki. The convoy consisted of 8 transport ships: Kyokusumaru, Kenbumaru, Tayomaru, Nojima, Ayomaru, Tamaru, Shinimaru, and Oigawa Maru. The escort was provided by 8 destroyers: Shirayuki, Asashio, Arashio, Tokitsukase, Yukikase, Uranami, Shikinami, and Asagumo. Approximately 100 Zero fighters provided constant air cover during the transit. The Japanese command had assembled an impressive convoy to replenish supplies, understanding that losses were inevitable. The experience of previous convoys to New Guinea indicated high risks, but Japanese commanders hoped that at least some ships would reach their destination. However, their calculations proved incorrect. On the same day, a B-24 Liberator patrol plane spotted the convoy and radioed its coordinates, course, and composition. Kenny's command immediately dispatched reconnaissance aircraft to shadow the enemy's movements. At the beginning of the operation, the weather was on the Japanese side. 2 tropical storms raging in the region created cloud cover and reduced visibility. Allied aircraft continued to track the convoy, but could not effectively attack due to the storms. The convoy proceeded at a speed of about 7 knots, which was approximately 8 miles per hour. This low speed was due to the heavily loaded transports. The destroyers, capable of speeds up to 20 knots, were forced to match the convoy's pace. By the night of March 1st, the Japanese had covered about 90 miles, roughly half the distance to Leh. Kimura welcomed the deteriorating weather conditions, as it meant reduced Allied air activity. However, the storms also caused heavy seas, which negatively affected the transports. Troops in the overcrowded holds on the lower decks suffered from seasickness. On the morning of March 2, 1943, weather conditions improved somewhat, allowing Allied reconnaissance aircraft to resume visual observation of the Japanese convoy. Around 10 a.m., 29 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers launched an attack from an altitude of 5,000 feet. However, as expected, high-altitude bombing proved largely ineffective. B-17 crews reported hits, but according to Japanese records, the damage was minimal. Probably only 1 transport ship sustained minor damage. Nevertheless, the attack achieved an important objective. It forced the convoy to repeatedly change course, significantly slowing its progress toward Leh. Throughout March 2nd, B-17 attacks continued. The flying fortresses dropped dozens of bombs from various altitudes. Japanese ships desperately maneuvered to evade the bombs, and fighters engaged Allied bombers. Several B-17s were damaged. 3 Japanese fighters were shot down in aerial combat, but no convoy ship was sunk. High-altitude attacks inconvenienced the convoy, but failed to halt its advance. As night fell on March 2nd, Commander Kenny realized that the decisive attack would take place the following morning. The modified B-25 bombers were fully ready for takeoff. Major Lana conducted a series of briefings with his pilots. They practiced low-altitude attack tactics, using a sunken ship as a target, and coordinated their actions with mixed groups of B-17s, B-25s, P-38s and Beaufighter fighters. Every pilot clearly understood their mission. The skip bombing technique had been perfected. Assault guns were meticulously sighted. Ammunition was loaded. The moment of truth was inexorably approaching. At dawn on March 3rd, 1943, the skies favored aviation, a cloudless expanse, crystal clear visibility, and a calm sea. Rear Admiral Kimura likely felt an ominous premonition as his convoy was just 30 nautical miles from Leh. This distance was close enough to feel the support of shore-based anti-aircraft guns, but not enough to escape the deadly embrace of an aerial assault. The Allied strike group, like a predatory beast, gathered at Cape Ward Hunt on the northern coast of Papua. Approximately 90 Allied aircraft, including the formidable B-17 Flying Fortresses, B-25 attack bombers, Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighter attack aircraft, and P-38 Lightning escort fighters prepared to descend upon the Japanese convoy. Throughout the day, like tidal waves, aerial attacks from various directions rolled in or one after another. Around 10 a.m., a hellish storm erupted. First, B-17s struck from moderate altitude, distracting and forcing the ships to maneuver frantically. Then, like shadows of death, low-flying aircraft appeared. Beaufighter fighters, like enraged hornets, swept over the convoy, spewing fire from 4 20mm cannons and 6 machine guns, suppressing anti-aircraft fire. The destroyers retaliated desperately, but the closing speed was too great. Following them, like harbingers of the apocalypse, arrived the modified B-25 attack bombers, and the true carnage began. During the fierce morning attacks that pounded the enemy vessels, the modified B-25 bombers played a crucial role. One pilot, selecting the transport Kyokusumaru as his primary target, resolutely closed in, descending to a critical altitude of 50 feet above the water. From a distance of just 1,000 yards, he opened a barrage of fire. 8 heavy machine guns, collectively spewing 6,800 rounds per minute, unleashed a deadly hail of 180 pounds of projectiles per second onto the ship. Tracer bullets, like fiery arrows, guided the destructive fire. The storm of bullets raked the Kyokusumaru from bow to superstructure, turning everything in its path into a heap of wreckage. Sailors fell dead, struck down at their posts. Anti-aircraft guns disintegrated under the hail of hits. The bridge, like a house of cards, crumbled under the crushing blows. Metal fragments, like deadly shrapnel, flew in all directions. Without stopping, the pilot dropped his bomb load. 2 powerful 500-pound high-explosive bombs with delayed fuses detached from the aircraft. After flying through the air, they entered the water 200 yards from the target, skipped once off the surface, and then slammed into the transport's hull just below the waterline, midship. The pilot sharply pulled the aircraft out of his dive and banked away. At that moment, the bombs detonated, causing 2 colossal underwater explosions that literally ripped out the bottom of the Kyokusumaru. The vessel immediately developed a critical list. Water rushed uncontrollably into the engine room and holds. The transport, having lost stability, began to sink rapidly, capsizing to port. In just 15 minutes, the Kyokusumaru disappeared beneath the waves, leaving behind only a vortex and debris. Following the first wave, other B-25 bombers descended upon the enemy. Each crew chose its target, and all employed the same deadly tactics: concentrated fire from onboard guns, skip bombs, and exploding ships. The transport ship Kenbu Maru suffered a massive attack, taking hits from several B-25s. Machine gun fire from the aircraft wiped out most of the crew on the decks. 4 bombs penetrated the hull below the waterline, and the Kenbu Maru broke in half, sinking in less than 10 minutes. The Teiyomaru was so riddled with bullets that its entire superstructure was engulfed in flames. 2 bombs penetrated the hull, and the transport sank, taking with it the lives of nearly 1,000 soldiers. The Nojima attempted to evade the attack, but its maneuverability proved insufficient. A B-25 raked it with fire from stern to bow, then dropped 2 bombs directly into the engine room. Disabled, the ship rapidly filled with water and sank that same day. Beaufighter fighters and the surviving B-25s then turned their attention to the destroyers. The destroyer Shirayuki, Admiral Kimura's flagship, came under crossfire from the attack aircraft, resulting in the deaths of almost everyone on the bridge, including the wounded admiral. A bomb that fell near the stern caused a fire in the ammunition magazine. Subsequent explosions tore off the ship's stern, and it sank. The Tokitsukaze received direct bomb hits that ignited its fuel tanks. The destroyer became a blazing inferno and sank within an hour. The Arashio, while attempting to maneuver, collided with the transport Nojima and sustained serious damage. The crew abandoned the ship, and it soon went to the bottom. In the midst of the battle, Japanese Zero fighters desperately tried to provide protection for the convoy. However, P-38 Lightning fighters skillfully intercepted them at high altitude, while B-25 bombers, like vultures, attacked at mast level, where fighter maneuvers became dangerous due to the risk of colliding with their own ships. The coordination of the Allied forces was impeccable. The attack, lasting about 40 minutes, left behind a scene of inevitable collapse. 4 transports had gone down, and 3 destroyers were completely destroyed. The remaining ships, scattered and partially damaged, were in chaos. Hundreds of Japanese soldiers and sailors were in the icy water, their bodies floating among the debris, and oil slicks blazed on the sea's surface. Later that day, Allied aircraft returned to launch new attacks on the surviving ships, which, like wounded beasts, were trying to reach Leh. The attacks were methodical and ruthless, with each ship becoming an individual target. B-25 attack bombers, descending to minimal altitude, unleashed a barrage of fire and bombs. Several more transports went down. The destroyer Asashio, already damaged, was sunk. By the night of March 3rd, 8 transports and 4 destroyers had been destroyed. Approximately 3,000 Japanese soldiers and sailors were killed or drowned. Only 2,700 were rescued by the 4 surviving destroyers and submarines that arrived from Rabaul. In the end, only 1,200 soldiers reached Leh, many without weapons or equipment. Out of the 6,900 soldiers originally on the ships, more than 5,700 became casualties of this tragedy. The convoy was completely routed. Allied losses were surprisingly light. 1 B-17 Flying Fortress bomber was shot down, 3 P-38 fighters were lost in combat, and 13 crew members died. Compared to the enormous Japanese losses, this was merely a minor skirmish. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea became a turning point in the Pacific War, vividly demonstrating the ability of land-based air power to destroy well-defended naval convoys. This triumph proved the effectiveness of skip bombing combined with overwhelming firepower, validating all the modifications Paul Gann had made to the B-25. The most important outcome was Japan's realization that it was impossible to continue supplying garrisons in the Southwest Pacific by sea. The Japanese command permanently abandoned the idea of sending large convoys to New Guinea, leading to the slow attrition and weakening of Japanese troops due to supply shortages. General MacArthur triumphantly announced the destruction of 22 enemy ships, including 3 cruisers and 7 destroyers, as well as the deaths of over 12,000 enemy soldiers. Although the actual figures were somewhat more modest, the strategic impact of this victory was immense. Kenny proved the viability of his concepts: skip bombing, modified bombers, and low-altitude attacks capable of overcoming strong defenses had become a reality. Paul Gann, observing the incoming reports from Australia, felt grim satisfaction, knowing that his modifications had destroyed the Japanese convoy, and his aircraft had sent thousands of enemy soldiers to the bottom. However, the thought of his family, still in Santo Tomas, continued to trouble him, reminding him that the war was far from over. The decisive victory in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea provided a powerful impetus for further development of the bomber modification program. Command, led by Kenny, ordered the immediate conversion of all available B-25s in the theater of operations into specialized attack aircraft. Gunn tirelessly continued to train new crews, refining tactics and increasing production. By mid-1943, a significant portion of the B-25s stationed in the Southwest Pacific had been modernized. These innovative solutions did not go unnoticed by North American Aviation, the aircraft manufacturer. Company representatives visited Gunn's workshops, where they thoroughly reviewed the modification process and requested detailed technical specifications. The goal was to integrate these advanced developments directly into factory production. In recognition of his contributions, Gunn was promoted major and sent to the United States to collaborate with North American Aviation at their Inglewood and Kansas City plants. For several months in 1943 and early 1944, he worked closely with engineers to create a factory-produced attack version of the B-25. The result of these joint efforts was the B-25G, equipped with a 75mm cannon in the nose, supplemented by 4 UMFT caliber heavy machine guns. A total of 405 B-25Gs were built. The 75mm cannon fired 14.7-pound shells, capable of penetrating ship armor and destroying fortified bunkers. However, reloading the cannon was complex, required a dedicated crew member in the nose, and had a low rate of fire. Gunn personally tested the B-25G in combat, leading an attack as part of the 3rd Strike Group against a Japanese destroyer. During the attack, he managed to disable the enemy's fire control system with a direct hit from the 75mm cannon, preventing the destroyer from coordinating its guns. The ship was subsequently sunk by a bomb attack. Despite Gunn's public statements that the cannon fire was the decisive factor, he privately admitted that bombs delivered the final blow to the destroyer. Following the B-25G, the B-25H modification entered mass production, embodying the concept of a flying fortress. A total of 1,000 B-25Hs were produced, each armed with a powerful 75mm cannon and 1450 caliber machine guns, distributed at various positions on board. In this model, the upper turret was moved forward, and the co-pilot's position was eliminated to reduce weight, with the navigator assigned the task of reloading the cannon. However, such impressive firepower did not come without consequences. The B-25H proved nose-heavy and difficult to handle. Wright Field, the Army Air Forces Development Center, sent a message to Gunn expressing concern about the dangers of this modification and suggesting that flights of these aircraft be suspended until the center of gravity issue was resolved. Legend has it that Gunn responded with wartime pragmatism. "Put the center of gravity on hold. We have a war on now." While the authenticity of this story remains questionable, it certainly reflects Gunn's priorities, for whom combat effectiveness was more important than technical perfection. Pilots, in turn, mastered methods to compensate for the handling issues. The final production version was the B-25J, which in some instances reverted to the traditional bomber nose, while others retained the attack nose. A total of 4,318 B-25Js were built, making it the most mass-produced variant. Some were equipped with 8 forward-firing guns in the nose, 4 guns inside blisters, 2 guns in the upper turret, and 4 guns in waist positions. Thus, the total armament could reach 1850 caliber machine guns, making it the most heavily armed bomber of World War II. While such firepower was excessive in most situations, it had a powerful psychological impact on enemy forces. Japanese forces learned to fear the sound of the Mitchell engines, whose distinctive roar became a harbinger of imminent doom. From 1943 to 1944, the advanced B-25 bombers actively struck Japanese targets in the Pacific region, playing a pivotal role in changing the course of the war. In August 1943, B-25 squadrons carried out daring raids on Japanese airfields located in the Wewak area, New Guinea. As a result of this operation, 174 enemy aircraft were destroyed on the ground, significantly weakening Japanese air power in the region. The success of the Wewak raids was made possible by Gunn's engineering ingenuity, as he managed to solve the B-25's insufficient range problem, which was critical for reaching such a distant target. Gunn developed an innovative system using auxiliary fuel tanks, which were placed in the aircraft's internal bomb bay. Once the primary fuel was depleted, these tanks were jettisoned through a specially designed hole in the floor. Despite the primitive design, which involved fuel vapor leaking into the fuselage and strong drafts, this system allowed for an increase in range of several hundred miles. The Wewak raids had far-reaching consequences, ending Japanese air superiority over New Guinea and enabling Allied ground forces to advance with minimal aerial resistance. In November 1943, B-25 attack aircraft delivered a devastating blow to Rabaul Harbor, carrying out one of the most memorable raids of the entire war. Major Raymond "Jock" Henterberry led a group of 38 B-25 bombers targeting enemy vessels in the well-protected harbor. The attack was carried out at extremely low altitude at masthead level, while P-38 fighters provided air cover and phosphorus bombs created a smokescreen to disorient the enemy. Of the 38 vessels in the harbor, 30 sustained direct hits. As a result of the attack, 1 heavy cruiser, 3 destroyers, and numerous transport and auxiliary vessels were sunk or severely damaged. This raid effectively paralyzed Rabaul, stripping it of its status as a forward base, and demonstrated that even the most fortified Japanese positions could not withstand the onslaught of modernized B-25s. During the 1944 Philippine campaign, B-25 Mitchell bombers played a crucial role in supporting ground troops, destroying Japanese communications and striking vessels navigating the archipelago's waters. Due to the speed and suddenness of their attacks, these aircraft earned the nickname Bats from Hell, as defenders had virtually no time to react. While the modified B-25s under Gunn's command were certainly not the sole factor in the Pacific War victory, they demonstrated exceptional effectiveness. They accounted for hundreds of sunken ships, thousands of destroyed aircraft on the ground, and tens of thousands of eliminated enemy soldiers. Thanks to their actions, General MacArthur was able to successfully implement the island-hopping strategy, cutting off Japanese garrisons from supply lines and reinforcements. They ensured Allied forces air superiority, which was a key condition for successful amphibious operations. During this challenging period, Gunn's personal struggle also continued. His family remained imprisoned in the Santo Tomas internment camp. Rare letters, exchanged via the Red Cross, offered a faint lifeline but were heavily censored. Gunn knew that conditions in the camp were deteriorating daily. Japanese guards grew increasingly brutal, reflecting the changing situation on the front. Food shortages and the spread of disease became a grave threat to the internees. In this situation, Gunn could only redouble his efforts. to fulfill his duty, hoping that each combat mission brought closer the long-awaited end of the war and the liberation of his loved ones. Tragic events continued to plague the Gunn family. In late 1944, American forces landed on the Philippine island of Leyte. Despite his advanced age, Gunn continued to fly combat missions, seeking new ways to crush the enemy. One night, Japanese aircraft attacked Tacloban airfield, where Gunn was stationed. Explosions of white phosphorus bombs rocked the area, and shrapnel severely wounded Gunn in the shoulder. The injury was so severe that his right arm lost functionality, and the pain became unbearable. After being evacuated to Australia, Gunn spent long months recovering from his wounds. This incident ended his career as a combat pilot, but the war was not yet over for him. On February 3, 1945, units of the 1st Cavalry Division, forming a mobile column, liberated the Santo Tomas internment camp in Manila. The cavalry arrived just in time, preventing the execution of the camp's leadership by Japanese guards. Amidst the chaos of street fighting, American soldiers liberated over 4,000 internees, including Polly Gunn and her 4 children. They had survived 3 years and 14 days of captivity. The family was emaciated, traumatized, but alive. General MacArthur personally visited the camp shortly after its liberation and met with the Gunn family. He arranged for their flight to Australia so they could reunite with Pappy Gunn. The reunion took place several weeks after their liberation. The man who had left Manila on Christmas Eve 1941 finally embraced his family again. Polly had managed to keep the family together despite the unbearable conditions. The boys, now young men, had endured the separation of male and female quarters. The girls had suffered years of deprivation. They were together again, but the war had left an indelible mark on their souls, changing them forever. After recovering from his injuries, Gunn did not leave the Army Air Forces, but continued his service, demonstrating resilience and dedication. Promoted to lieutenant colonel, he focused on improving aviation technology and developing tactical methods, although he no longer participated in combat flights himself. He concluded his military career on June 30, 1948, as a colonel, forced to retire due to medical reasons, a victim of the combat injuries he sustained. His bravery and contributions were recognized with numerous awards, including the Distinguished Flying Cross with an oak leaf cluster, signifying a second award, the Silver Star, the Legion of Merit, the Air Medal, and a remarkable 9 Purple Hearts, each signifying a separate wound or injury sustained in combat. Additionally, he received numerous unit citations and campaign awards. Returning to the Philippines, Gunn undertook the reconstruction of Philippine Airlines, contributing to the nation's resurgence after years of occupation and the destructive aftermath of liberation. He worked to restore air travel, reconnecting the archipelago's scattered islands. Continuing to fly, he never stopped taking risks and pushing boundaries. However, fate had other plans. On October 11, 1957, just a week before his 58th birthday, Paul Irvin Pappy Gunn was on a charter flight when his plane encountered a powerful storm and crashed. Thus tragically ended the life of a man who had dedicated nearly 4 decades to his passion, flying. He was buried at Barrancas National Cemetery, located at Naval Air Station, Pensacola, Florida, a place where he once trained young pilots. His name and deeds remain in the memory of posterity, immortalized in various forms. Gunn's contribution to the development of attack aviation can hardly be overstated. The modifications he proposed for the B-25 bomber became a benchmark and were widely adopted throughout World War II. Approximately 9,190 B-25 Mitchell aircraft were produced, and a significant portion of them were converted into attack aircraft, incorporating Gunn's innovative solutions. His developed masthead bombing technique proved exceptionally effective, destroying numerous Japanese ships and making a significant contribution to the Allied victory in the Pacific theater. Gunn's story is a vivid example of how innovation can emerge in the most unexpected places, even within the walls of a repair hangar where a grieving father sought an outlet for his pain. While military bureaucracy preferred to stick to proven methods and existing weaponry, Gunn demonstrated in practice that bold and unconventional solutions were necessary in critical situations. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea became a textbook example studied in military academies worldwide. In this battle, a decisive victory with minimal losses was achieved through a skillful combination of reconnaissance, coordinated actions, new weapons, and tactics. The battle demonstrated the immense potential of air power in combating naval forces when properly employed. The outcome of the battle was devastating. 8 transports and 4 destroyers were sunk. Enemy losses exceeded 5,000 personnel, while the Allies lost only 4 aircraft. The arithmetic of war proved merciless. Air superiority became the key to survival. Every ship sunk in the Bismarck Sea meant the disruption of dozens of military operations, the loss of hundreds of soldiers, and thousands of undelivered munitions to the front. Destroying enemy resources before they reached the battlefield became one of the most effective ways to wage war. The triumph of American military engineering during World War II unveiled the modified B-25 bomber, which became a true nightmare for the Japanese Navy and logistics in the Southwest Pacific. This aircraft transformed into a versatile weapon capable of single-handedly accomplishing tasks that previously required the coordinated efforts of an entire group of different aircraft. The B-25 could cover vast distances, unleash a torrent of fire on enemy ships, destroy them with audacious masthead attacks, and return to base, ready for new sorties. Following the devastating defeat in the Bismarck Sea, Japanese command realized that daytime convoys within range of Allied aircraft had become a suicidal endeavor. The Japanese switched to night transits, relied on submarines to deliver vital supplies, and increasingly resorted to barges that hugged coastal waters during daylight hours. However, these measures only mitigated but did not prevent losses. B-25s relentlessly hunted barges and night modifications equipped with radar-tracked convoys even in pitch darkness. Japanese logistics in the Southwest Pacific lost all security. Neither time of day, method of delivery, nor location guaranteed the safety of supplies. The suffocating grip of American air power tightened month by month until Japanese garrisons were completely isolated. In New Guinea, the Philippines, and across all Pacific islands, Japanese soldiers continued to fight desperately, suffering severe shortages of supplies and with no hope of reinforcement. Their bravery and tenacity were doomed to futility in the face of absolute air superiority, achieved through such instruments of victory as this B-25. By 1945, thanks to relentless modifications, the B-25 had evolved into a formidable and widely used anti-shipping weapon in the Pacific theater. The aircraft's evolution followed a path of increasing firepower, as clearly demonstrated by the B-25G, H and J variants. However, despite all improvements, at its core remained Gunn's innovative concept, transforming a medium bomber into a heavily armed flying platform designed to suppress enemy defenses and deliver devastating low-level attacks. Remarkably, even in the final days of the war, in August 1945, these modernized B-25s continued to actively participate in combat operations. They were assigned the symbolic role of escorting the Japanese delegation traveling from Japan to Manila to sign the instrument of surrender in mid-August. Thus, the aircraft that had made invaluable contributions to the victory over Japan witnessed its ultimate defeat. Post-war analysis by both American and Japanese historians confirmed the outstanding significance of Gunn's innovations. Japanese naval officers acknowledged that after the devastating defeat in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, they realized their inability to operate safely in waters within range of Allied aircraft. The psychological effect of deploying the modified B-25s proved as significant as the physical destruction. Convoy commanders lived in constant fear of the sudden appearance of low-flying bombers, capable of annihilating entire ship formations before they could mount an effective defense. The modernized B-25s heralded a new era in warfare, where medium bombers assumed the role of ship hunters, demonstrating the effectiveness of submarines and the firepower of cruisers. The implications of this innovation extended far beyond the Pacific War, influencing the development of military tactics overall. The post-war era saw a profound re-evaluation of aerial combat tactics, with air forces worldwide meticulously analyzing the experience of skip bombing and the use of forward-firing armament. These studies led to the widespread adoption of the attack aircraft concept, an aircraft whose primary role was to attack using cannon armament rather than bombs. Striking examples of this development are the AC-47, AC-119 and AC-130 gunships actively employed in Vietnam and subsequent military conflicts. These aircraft were in essence the conceptual successors to Gunn's modified B-25s, which had proven their effectiveness during World War II. Of the total 9,990 B-25 aircraft produced during World War II, over 100 examples survive to this day, most of them in the United States. Many of these aircraft are maintained in flying condition and regularly participate in air shows, where they invariably thrill audiences with their impressive size, powerful sound, and rich history. The unique roar of the Wright R2600 engines remains unforgettable. The sight of a B-25 flying low over an airfield, as if over Japanese ships during the war, serves as a living reminder of the feats these aircraft accomplished. Some of the flying B-25s have been recreated in their attack aircraft configurations, with forward-firing cannons installed in the nose. During demonstration flights, these cannons produce a deafening sound when firing blank rounds, accompanied by bright flashes and a palpable recoil that shakes the entire aircraft. Witnessing such a demonstration of a B-25 strafer allows spectators to at least partially imagine what Japanese sailors felt in the final moments before their ship sank. Across the globe, aviation museums display various modifications of the B-25, frozen in time as testaments to a bygone era. The National Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, boasts a comprehensive collection of these legendary aircraft. In Pensacola, Florida, the National Naval Aviation Museum houses a B-25, recalling a time when Pappy Gunn himself shared his knowledge with future generations of aviators there. The Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum also carefully preserves the memory of this aircraft, which is not merely a piece of metal, but a symbol of innovation, courage, and triumph. Each exhibit tells its own unique story, recounting daring engineering solutions, desperate struggles, and ultimately a long-awaited victory. In 1959, General George Kenney, after retiring from military service, decided to immortalize Pappy Gunn by writing a biography of this exceptional individual whose innovative ideas profoundly influenced the course of the war. Kenney wanted to ensure that Gunn's contribution to defeating the enemy would not be forgotten by future generations. In his book, he meticulously detailed all the bold modifications Gunn made to aircraft designs, his personal participation in combat missions, and his relentless fight to free his family, who were held captive by the Japanese. Kenney emphasized that Gunn was a pivotal figure in the Pacific theater of operations, a man whose unconventional decisions and actions, taken on his own initiative, saved the lives of thousands of Allied soldiers and hastened the long-awaited day of victory. Nathaniel Gunn, Pappy's youngest son, also contributed to preserving his father's memory by writing a book that presented the Gunn family's story through the lens of personal experiences, describing their life in Santa Thomas and the agonizing wait for liberation. The Gunn family's story became a vivid example of the price of war and the incredible strength of spirit required to survive inhumane conditions. In 1975, the United States Air Force honored Gunn's memory by naming a training center after him, symbolizing recognition of his outstanding achievements. This acknowledgement, though belated, was imbued with sincerity and deep respect. Gunn never sought personal fame or recognition. His primary goal was maximum effectiveness and excellence in his work. The story of how unconventional solutions and innovative modifications proposed by a single engineer led to the creation of a powerful and destructive weapon system remains relevant today. Gunn refused to accept his family's tragic fate, would not settle for existing weaponry, and rejected rules and limitations that, in his view, hindered innovation and progress. This defiance of conformity, bolstered by his exceptional technical skill and Kenney's support, led to modifications that fundamentally changed the methods of warfare. The B-25 Strafe, a result of these innovations, destroyed hundreds of Japanese ships, inflicted enormous losses on enemy forces, and made an invaluable contribution to the Allied victory in the Pacific theater. This narrative serves as a vivid example that innovation can emerge from the most unexpected sources and achieve success by pursuing unconventional paths. Of course, the modified B-25 was not the sole weapon that secured victory in World War II. That victory was the result of the combined efforts of millions of people using thousands of different types of weapons throughout 4 years of global conflict. However, the modernized B-25 achieved results far exceeding its numbers. This aircraft became a symbol of what happens when acute necessity meets technical capability, when personal determination aligns with military needs, and when an individual is resolved to prevent defeat. This weapon, conceived in a repair hangar in a moment of desperation, carried out audacious low-level sorties, unleashing death and destruction from its cannons. Bombs, seemingly playfully, skipped across the waves to pierce the hulls of enemy vessels and detonate deep below the waterline. These attacks thwarted Japanese reinforcement plans, hastened victory in the war, saved countless Allied soldiers' lives, and liberated one family from 3 years of captivity, which was the primary goal of the entire operation.